Hello, glad you could stop by. Today I would like to talk to you about two common troubled project paths and give you some tips to help avoid both. The first path is placing too much effort into documentation. I suggest that when you catch your project heading down this path, stop and ask, what is the driving need behind our documentation requirements? Often that need comes from two sources. First, your customer or senior management may be looking for some level of assurance that the software team is doing the right things. The second need often comes from the users and software maintainers who need some help once the software product is deployed. Unfortunately, documentation has not proven to be very good at meeting either of these needs. From the software maintainer and user perspective, often it isn't trusted to be kept up to date once the software has been deployed. And in terms of the team doing the right things, historically, we found that documentation really hasn't been that valuable at helping software teams develop high quality software. The second common troubled path is reacting to the first common troubled path by claiming we're agile and then throwing out the essentials for high quality software along with the documentation. Now, we know, today a lot of organizations are trying to become more agile. But what we're seeing is that many of those same organizations are struggling to become agile while also being confident that they're doing the right things to ensure the essentials for good high quality software are maintained. And in a moment, I'm going to get back to that phrase, to become agile, because what I mean by that may not be what you're thinking right now. But first, let me just step back a little background. You may already know that I've blogged before and I've published some information on Essence. Essence is a framework that does in fact capture the essentials for high quality software. And it does it in a very simple way. And to the point of what I'm talking to you about here, it does it in a way that is independent of the degree of agility you're driving for with your teams and in your company. Essence also provides a very simple language to help you express practices on top of those essentials to help guide your teams. And what I want to talk to you about here today is just three parts of an Essence practice. And I want to talk about these three parts of an Essence practice in terms of how they can help your teams achieve that right level of agility for their situation, for your organization, while also ensuring that the essentials are not jeopardized, and also help you avoid those two common trouble project paths. Those three parts of a practice are the purpose or goal of the practice, the activities conducted as part of the practice, and the work products produced. Now, the activities are what you do when you're conducting a practice, and they can vary greatly in prescriptiveness. In other words, you could specify your activities at a very high level, just specifying what needs to be done, or you can get very detailed into the how-to side of the activities. Similarly, with work products, the degree of detail can vary greatly. Now let's look at some examples from my Upside Down book. In story 2 in part 1 of the book, you learn about a team that came up with an innovative approach or an innovative set of activities to achieve the goal of their sprint review practice when they learned that a key stakeholder couldn't attend the sprint review. They actually got on a plane and went to the customer's site where they could demonstrate the product and get their feedback and buy-in. Now, the point that I want to make here, the point I want to emphasize, is that the goal of the sprint review practice wasn't to hold a meeting called a sprint review, which is what too many teams get overly focused on when they blindly zero in on following a set of prescribed activities that are overly prescribed is probably the best way to say it. Stated a little differently, what we're seeing is that too often teams just fall into going through the motions of overly prescribed activities. Other authors have referred to this as the difference between being agile and doing agile. And to be honest with you, I really didn't understand this myself until I observed the difference in one of my own client organizations. What you really learn from this story that I just referred to in part 1 of my book is how a team, when they stay focused on the goal, finds innovative, creative ways to achieve that goal, which in this case was getting the buy-in of the stakeholder, not holding a meeting called a sprint review. In that same story, you learn about a challenge the team faces with a communication problem between the developers and a tester. And the team comes up with an improved testing practice. And one of the parts of that improvement is the developers agree to place a note in their tickets to help the tester know what needs to be tested. Now, what's important to understand here is that the team, the developers, understood that that note, that's an example of a work product, a very simple work product. But they understood that was one way that they could help achieve the goal of the practice. The goal was not to place a note in a ticket. The goal was to improve communication with testers. So the team understood that when there was a situation where they didn't know exactly how to describe what they needed to tell the tester, rather than put a note in the ticket, they could get up from their workstation, walk over, and talk to the tester directly. This is a perfect example of what we mean when we say being agile. Now, one caution that I want to give you here. If you decide to go down the path of having less prescriptive activities, which allows more choice to your teams, I highly recommend that you put some limits on those choices and give the team good coaching so that you don't fall into chaos. Now, in concluding this video and in my blog, I'd just like to say, keep in mind that activities and work products are important parts of practices, but they should never be confused with the goal. And that's what you want to watch out for, because when you start to get into that feeling of we're going through the motions and we may be confusing the activity or the work product with the goal, that's an indication you may be getting too much into the doing agile side. So in closing, use these simple practice tips when you're developing your practices and when you're coaching your teams in your practices, and you might just find it easier than you think of avoiding both common project trouble paths and locating your right level of being agile. Thanks again for dropping by, and have a great day.